Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, September 19th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to continue on with our Week 4 predictions. We're going to do Tennessee at Oklahoma, a very, very fun game, and Josh Heupel's homecoming back to Norman, Oklahoma. Then we'll get to a little bit of talk around Utah at Oklahoma State, a very interesting game that just got a little bit more interesting last night. I'll break down exactly what I mean in the second segment. Then we'll get into a little talk around all the other games, top games at least, that I'll break down and give at least a general pick for. We won't necessarily give an exact number pick, but want to make sure I give you guys an idea of my lean in those games. And then got to get into some questions for this upcoming week. We did some yesterday, going to do some more today, including one around Billy Napier, who is still the head coach of Florida right about now. And then we have some hot takes for you in the Week 4 edition of Hot Take Thursday. Very, very fun group of hot takes, and one that you're going to want to be on the lookout for tonight, but we'll break that down when we get there. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen is to use that super chat at the bottom of that chat on the Sports Network page. You'll see that little $sign. Click on that, add any question, comment you like, add your name. It will pop up on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive as possible, especially in the season. Definitely want you guys to have as much say in the show as possible. So definitely utilize that if you can, and then utilize the GSMCPodcast.net page if that's a little bit easier for you. But sometimes that super chat can be really, really easy. So utilize that if you'd like. But let's jump right in, because this is about to get crazy. This game is absolutely awesome over there at Norman, Oklahoma this upcoming weekend. And it's not just about, these teams. It's about these storylines going in. Josh Heupel led Oklahoma to a national title in 2000, is one of the most beloved players for quite some time, came back as the offensive coordinator, left under some interesting circumstances. He put together a pretty good offense, got let go. They brought in Lincoln Riley, so didn't necessarily affect too much, and obviously worked out for both parties, but going to be a really interesting reception in Norman, Oklahoma for Josh Heupel. I think there's going to be some fans that give him a little bit of a cheer, but then immediately start booing. There will be some fans that don't give him a cheer until the clock hits zero, and I understand both approaches, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that works. He poked kind of fun at it, saying they're definitely going to let us work in silence. They absolutely won't, but I understand what he's saying there. It's going to be really, really fun to see him back where he, got his start and where he's a real legend for them, at least in terms of playing. And then Oklahoma got a couple of injuries that have to be figured out. It sounds like Nick Anderson is going to go, and we'll talk about him here in a second. And then Branson Hickman really has to go. This offensive line needs as much help as they can possibly get, particularly against this interior defensive line for Tennessee that is so deep. So getting Branson Hickman back would be as big of a thing for this game as really anything on the board. But players to watch, got to start with Nick Anderson. If he is back on the field, he is the best wide receiver on the field for Oklahoma. Period. End of story. He is such a huge player for them, and one of those guys that I think there's so much energy around the Oklahoma program. One of the reasons why Dylan Gabriel is at Oregon right now is they wanted to push the ball downfield. That's the way they want to go about business going forward, and they haven't necessarily been able to do that. And a lot of that has to do with the O-line, and they're going to have to play really well in this game. But part of it is they don't have that many receivers that really scare you downfield. Deion Burks is a terrifying guy, and he's someone that you're going to have to keep a cap on, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But Nick Anderson is the guy that opens up all of that. He's the guy that takes up the attention of the safety over top, or the linebacker creeps a little bit out to help double team him, and then you maybe have a Deion Burks downfield. Maybe you have someone else downfield that you can get the ball to, Brennan Thompson, an absolute speedster. The reality is this Oklahoma offense can't just be throwing the ball downfield. It can't just be deep threats. You got to have a guy that's going to open up those holes. Nick Anderson is the guy to do that. So very important player, and definitely a great time to get him back for Oklahoma, that's for sure. And then Billy Bowman. This is a guy that you likely know very well, one of the best safeties in the entire country, and you can imagine why he's on this list. You have to make sure that this defense is in accordance, that they're in alignment, because Tennessee can beat you in a hurry. And I promise you, if you get beat over top a couple of times in this game, your offense might not have the firepower to return that. So Billy Bowman getting a pick, Billy Bowman just playing really sound football on Saturday, is almost a must for Oklahoma to be able to win this one. But then, on the other side, Deshaun Bishop, I think, is huge in this game. When you talk about the Tennessee run game, so much is about Dylan Sampson, and frankly, I've been as impressed about him as really any other running back in the country to this point. That being said, I think you need a little bit of a bruiser, and Dylan Sampson can do this all well as well, but Deshaun Bishop is just a little bit of a bigger back, and I think he'll give Dylan Sampson a little bit of a breather, and also bruise up these Oklahoma linebackers and D-line just a little bit during that time. So I think he's a hugely important player just to keep these drives moving. On that 3rd and 1, on that 4th and 1, you can hand the ball to this guy, and he can get those 2 yards, and maybe in the process, he can kind of wear down this Oklahoma defense just a little bit. And then finally, Arian Carter. We talked about this a little bit after last week's game against Tulane, but Oklahoma's doing way more quarterback run game, and it's something that they likely have to do. In fact, it's something that we'll talk about with this game, but Arian Carter's going to be huge. He's going to be a guy that just keeps everything at bay. He keeps Jackson Arnold in the pocket. He keeps this run game from really getting going like they have been in the past, and then maybe from time to time he makes that big-time play. He gets that pick on Jackson Arnold, where that's what happened last week against Tulane. He was pressured, threw a pick to a linebacker that took it back to the house. So it's one of those players that is so important every single week, but especially with a guy like Jackson Arnold on the other side, you're going to have to make sure this defense has everything in accordance, and that's the guy that's going to do it for Tennessee. For Tennessee, I think the keys to the game, let your D-line eat. When you talk about one of the biggest mismatches in this game, frankly, I think maybe the biggest mismatch in this game is that Tennessee D-line against that Oklahoma O-line. They are all over the place over there at Oklahoma. They have a couple of injuries that are not helping by any means, and we'll see if Branson Hickman can get back, because I think if he doesn't, then Dominic Bailey and Bryson Eason on the inside is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with, I'll be totally honest. And then on the outside, they feel a little bit better about their tackles over there at Oklahoma, but James Pierce Jr. in this pass rush is going to cause all types of problems. So it's going to be one of those things that I think Tennessee's just going to sit back. They're going to say, we're not going to let them take the top off this defense. We're not going to let them get that big play that gets the crowd involved. And then we're going to let our 4 guys up front just dominate your 5. And I think that's a real possibility in this game. Then maybe you'll adjust as things go if things change. But as of right now, it looks like this is a pretty well way to go about business, is just letting those 4 guys up front just go to work on this offensive line. And then get Nico going early. I think this is something that people are slightly overlooking as we go into this game. There's been more talk about it as we've gotten closer, but this is his first true road game. This is an entirely different thing for what Nico Iamaleava is about to walk into. He has to be able to get into a rhythm. He has to be able to get comfortable and get his heart rate just a little bit down. He's been 71 completion, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's been really incredible. I'm not necessarily taking anything away from the kid. This is just a little bit different on Saturday. It's just going to be a little bit different for him. Get him comfortable early, and then he's going to look like that guy in the second half. But if you don't get him comfortable and this crowd gets after him a little bit, maybe you see some of those rookie mistakes we haven't quite seen yet. And then keep a cap on this OU offense. We talked about it a second ago, but OU is outmatched in a number of places in this game. They have so many different places where I lean Tennessee, and frankly, other than linebacker and DB, I think I'd lean Tennessee in this game. But that being said, the Oklahoma wide receivers against this back end for Tennessee might be a favorable matchup, and you have to get O-line protection, obviously, for this to happen, but you got to be able to hit some shots downfield. On the other side, Tennessee's got to make sure that doesn't happen. This crowd will get involved in a hurry if you let them get downfield, and there's going to be a number of things that play into this. Obviously, the pass rush being as good as it is at Tennessee helps this a ton, because your back end doesn't have to block for quite as much, but it's going to be one of those things that you let OU get that one big play to Deion Burks down the field, you might not be able to see another play, because there's going to be so many different things that come into play, like the fan base, like all of the different, like the worries that Tennessee might have had coming into the season that they haven't had to face yet. It's always the old saying, everyone has a plan until you punch them in the face. Maybe if OU punches you in the face, then you fall over. But if you have the ability to sustain that, or if you have the ability to just not take the punch at all, you're definitely going to take that, and you'll see what happens on the other side. And then Oklahoma, how can they win? You have to get Jackson Arnold running. And frankly, I don't necessarily love that this is one of the keys to victory for Oklahoma right about now. He is their leading rusher, though, and he shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the way they're going about business. But with that O-line, you're not going to have the same amount of holes. So you have to use the quarterback draw game. You have to use a little bit of quarterback power, anything that gets your offense moving forward, because right now, Oklahoma doesn't have a lot of options for that. So they have to be able to utilize all of their options. I think Taylor Tatum, the running back, is going to be a special player. I think this is a lot to put on his shoulders this early. So you're going to have to utilize that quarterback run game. You're going to have to make life tough on him, and then maybe you can keep this back end at bay, or maybe you can pull the back end down into the box and then hit him over top. So you're going to have to get Jackson Arnold on the ground. You're going to have a big game from him, because that's really the only way they're going to be able to hold this D-line at bay the entire game. And then hold the Tennessee run game at bay. That's the big time goal here, because we talk about the deep passing game, and it's the same thing we do pretty much around the country, whether you want to talk about Ole Miss or Texas or Tennessee or any of the elite offenses. It's all about the pass, right? Everyone loves to see the downfield pass. Everyone loves to see Quinn Ewers going through all his progressions, Nico Iamaleava stretching the field downfield. The run game is where they make their money. The run game is where everything is set up. And if OU, who is very good against the run in a number of different ways, mainly because if Danny Stutzman's on the field, you are going to be good against the run. I think he's the best linebacker in the country and a guy that probably has to play his best football on Saturday if they want to win. But overall, I think he's one of those guys that you can't let those 2-yard runs turn into 4, or those 4-yard runs turn into 6, or it's going to be a really long night. And then you're going to have to bring Billy Bowman or Peyton Bowen down into the box, and then maybe you have a deep shot over the top from Tennessee. So Oklahoma's going to have to play kind of a tightrope walk. This is such a hard defense to prepare for that maybe you do have to sell out just a little bit to stop the run, and then just bet on yourself to handle the wide receivers on the back end. You have an elite group of DBs, so maybe that's the best way forward for this defense on Saturday, because if they can't get the run game going, then maybe Nico gets a little bit more nervous and you can take advantage of a mistake. And then finally, get that one big play. Oklahoma is one of those places that this fan base will get as involved as anyone in the country, but you got to give them a reason, especially early on in the season with all of these offensive struggles. They're waiting for that moment, right? They're waiting for everything to open up and for the skies to, or the clouds to part and everything to, the angels to start singing in this offense. It could happen in this game, and it could happen in a hurry, and it's one of those things that Deion Burks is so dangerous. He has to have a big-time effect on this game. I think Brennan Thompson is someone that just throw the ball up and let him run under it. He is such a special athlete, has track speed, not football speed. Definitely want to utilize him. Point being, get that big play. Whether it's Deion Burks downfield or it's Peyton Bowen on the other side taking a ball down back to the house, you need that one big play, because not only will your fan base get involved, they'll feel like, okay, this is the flip in the season that we very much needed, but Tennessee has not taken a punch yet. You give out that punch, then maybe Tennessee falls over, and then you have the ability to beat them. But overall, I think this is as fun of a game as you could possibly have. This is so much fun. You have the behind the scenes with Josh Heupel coming back to his old place, old stomping grounds. You have the coaching battles of elite defensive coordinator in Brent Venables against an elite offensive coordinator in Josh Heupel. I know they're not the OC and the DC, but are the play callers, at least for the most part, in those offenses. Those are elite guys, and it's going to be incredible to watch them go to work. I think, honestly, this might be one of the most fun games just across the board in this weekend, but more than anything, I just can't take... I can't take this Oklahoma offensive line right now. I can't bet on them to be able to stand up against this Tennessee defensive front. I don't necessarily feel great that Tennessee's not going to be able to get loose a couple of times downfield. Now, I do think Oklahoma's going to keep this close. I think the Oklahoma defense is going to play really inspired football. I think it's going to look really good for about 3.5 quarters. I think Tennessee might score a late touchdown to make this look better. I just think Tennessee has too many answers and Oklahoma has too many questions right now. Now, I do think this Oklahoma team will slowly get better and frankly turn into a really good team throughout time. But that O-line is just too far from where it needs to be to play this game right now. So I do have Tennessee winning that one. Frankly, you could convince me the other way. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game. And although I picked Tennessee by 10, I probably could have easily flipped that to Oklahoma by 3 just because that atmosphere is going to be so crazy. And maybe Tennessee is one of those teams that they've been able to roll for the first couple of weeks. You punch them in the mouth, maybe things get interesting for them. But it'll be so much fun to watch that one. Cannot wait for that one in Norman, Oklahoma. But let's take our first break here. When we come back, we're going to do Utah at Oklahoma State. There's a little bit of a change to this game last night, and I'll break down exactly what we mean after this, but going to be a really fun one in Stillwater. So stick around. We'll be right back with that.